The inheritance was all mine. Father would be happier if his son inherited everything rather than some woman who isn't even related by blood. You're not my sister anymore, I'm cutting ties with you, my brother declared with a sneering smile. Indeed, to our father, I wasn't related by blood. I was my mother's child from a previous relationship. Still, he had loved me as his own daughter, which made him very special to me. I was furious that my brother wanted to monopolize everything our father left behind, but his words about cutting ties with me brought a sense of relief. Fine by me, once you inherit, don't ever contact me again, I replied. Like I'd ever do that, and don't expect a single penny from me later, he shot back. I'm Kelly, a 29-year-old civil servant. My brother, Steve, is 22 and just graduated from university. He often brags about his prestigious job at a well-known company, always looking down on the rural city office where I work. Must be Dad's genes, right? I've got the blood of a father who worked for a major corporation, he'd boast, smugly emphasizing the bloodline he shares with our father. Steve and I share the same mother but have different fathers. Steve is the biological son of our father, while I am my mother's child from her previous marriage. Though I was technically a stepchild, Dad never treated me differently. He loved and cared for me deeply, which is why I regard him as my true father. My biological father, on the other hand, left us when I was little, running off with his mistress. I barely remember him. When Steve was younger, he didn't care about our different fathers, but everything changed after our mother passed away in a tragic car accident when I was an adult and Steve was still in middle school. Grieving and unable to cope, Steve started blaming me. At the funeral, he screamed, "Why did Mom have to die? It should have been you. No one would care if the step-sibling was gone." His cruel words shocked me, but I stayed silent as our father, angrier than I'd ever seen him, scolded Steve harshly. That day, any affection I had for my brother faded. Over the years, our relationship deteriorated. Steve seemed obsessed with outshining me academically, but his ambitions always backfired. He failed to get into his first-choice schools for both high school and university. As a student, he couldn't out-earn me, a full-time employee, and he avoided sports or arts to escape potential failure. Instead, Steve focused on asserting his higher status as Dad's biological son. He taunted me endlessly, saying, "I'm Dad's real child, you're just an outsider." Initially, I believed his behavior stemmed from misplaced grief, but as he grew older, his words carried genuine malice. Exhausted by his provocations, I started avoiding him altogether. When Steve decided to live at home during university, I moved out to my own apartment. I even coordinated visits with Dad to ensure I wouldn't run into him. 4 years later, Steve graduated and landed a job at a reputable company. I had prepared a tie as a graduation gift but decided against giving it to him when he greeted me with his usual smugness. "Of course, I got a better job than you. I've got Dad's genes," he said, clearly unchanged by his time at university. I continued living independently, working as a civil servant, while Steve lived with Dad and navigated the struggles of a new working adult. Unfortunately, this phase didn't last long. Less than a year later, Dad fell gravely ill and passed away suddenly, leaving me no time to say goodbye. At the funeral, I took on the responsibilities of the chief mourner. Thanks to Dad's meticulous planning, most of the arrangements were straightforward, except for the inheritance. The only inheritors were Steve and me, and I knew the discussion would lead to conflict. As expected, Steve showed up late to our meeting without so much as an apology and immediately said, "The inheritance? I'm the real child, so it's all mine. You're just a stepchild, an outsider. Isn't it greedy for an outsider to claim anything?" Tired of his arrogance, I offered a deal. "I won't inherit anything. In return, you must promise never to contact me for the rest of your life." "Deal, like I'd ever contact you. Just disappear," he said, sneering. Disgusted, I left the meeting. The next day, I visited a lawyer to formalize my renunciation of the inheritance. "Kelly, as a stepchild, you technically don't have inheritance rights," the lawyer started. "Actually, Dad adopted me legally," I interrupted, "but I don't want anything. I'm giving it all up." Dad had officially adopted me after marrying my mother, which meant I had full inheritance rights. But I wanted nothing to do with the complications of being labeled a stepchild or a legitimate child. I simply wanted to cut ties and move on. A month later, the family court finalized my renunciation. I was finally free from the burdens of my brother and the toxic family dynamic. I contacted Steve. "Hello, my renunciation of the inheritance is complete," I began. "You know, from the estate investigation, Dad had. Shut up. Steve cut me off angrily. I get it. You've renounced the inheritance. Stop acting like you're my real sister, and don't ever contact me again. He hung up before I could say another word. I sighed deeply, knowing Steve. It was only a matter of time before he came crying back for help. That thought made me feel even worse. 3 months later, the calls and emails started coming in, numerous and persistent. I reluctantly answered one of his calls, hearing his exhausted voice on the other end. You know what? I need to borrow some money, he said. Dad had debts, and I can't keep up with the repayments. I used Dad's savings too, but it's still not enough. What? Sure, Dad had some loans to repay, but if you've used all his savings for it, how is it still this bad? I asked, confused. Steve immediately snapped. Did you know about this? Did you push the debt onto me, knowing everything? You have such a bad personality. Oh, right, because you're just a stepchild. You must be jealous of me, the legitimate child. I clenched my jaw. Right, because I'm the one who hung up on you when I tried to warn you, and I'm the one who blocked your calls. Funny how you suddenly unblocked me when you needed help. Who's the one with the bad personality here? The truth was, I had learned all about Dad's financial situation during the inheritance renunciation process. I had tried to inform Steve back then, but he had cut me off entirely, left with no way to communicate. I had given up trying. Now, he was coming to me in tears, just as I had anticipated. Do you even understand how hard it was for Dad to send you to high school and university? I asked, frustrated. Sure, he had educational insurance and Mom's life insurance helped, but things like the house and car had to be paid for with loans. I'm not your sister, right? So why don't you take this up with the mortgage lender or the lawyer instead of me, an outsider? What are you talking about? Steve retorted. Don't sweat the small stuff. Besides, I'm treating you like a sister, even though you're just a stepchild. You should be happy about that. Now, come on, Kelly, give me some money. Furious at his arrogance, I sharply hung up the call and blocked his number. Steve didn't know where I lived, and I had made sure not to leave any clues about my home at Dad's house. To be safe, I even got a new phone. But that didn't stop him. Kelly, please, I need money, otherwise, I can't survive. Steve started showing up at the city office where I worked. Gone was his usual smugness. He looked genuinely distressed. He would visit repeatedly, always during lunch breaks, as if sneaking away from his job. On days he didn't visit, he bombarded my phone with calls, disrupting my work. I explained the situation to my boss, and they moved me to an administrative position, but Steve's harassment escalated. He began staying past closing hours, waiting in the parking lot to confront me after work. One evening, I finally had enough. I caught him lingering in the parking lot and dragged him aside. Stop it already, I said. Don't cause trouble at my workplace. I told you to consult the loan institutions and the lawyer. I already did, Steve snapped, arms crossed, anger flashing in his eyes. The group life insurance covered the mortgage, so I don't have to pay for the house anymore. The car loan is down to about $5,000, and I renegotiated the payments, but that's not the problem. Then what is the problem? I pressed. Steve hesitated, nervously looking around before finally admitting, Dad had some savings, so I spent it on various things. I went over budget, then I borrowed money from a friend, but now I can't pay him back. He's saying I scammed him, and no one else will lend me money. If I go to a predatory lender, I'll be in even deeper trouble. I sighed, my head pounding. His story was convoluted, but the truth was clear. Steve had spiraled into a financial mess of his own making. So, let me get this straight, I said. You kept borrowing money to pay off debts, and now you're stuck. Exactly, he said, his desperation growing. I think I'm already blacklisted. If you pay it off for me, it'll all be over. Just $88,000, come on, Kelly. When he reached out to me, I slapped his hand away. There's no way I'm giving you a dime, I said coldly. This is entirely your fault for overspending and borrowing from loan sharks. Why should I clean up your mess? Steve glared at me, his voice dripping with contempt. Is it because we're only half related? Stepchildren are the worst, so selfish and unpleasant. Without another word, I got into my car and started the engine. Steve tried to cling to the door, but I shoved him off. You promised never to contact me again in exchange for the inheritance, I reminded him. You've broken that promise, begged for money, and insulted me. I don't owe you anything. If you show up again, I'll call the police. Kelly, please. I didn't let him finish. I drove off, leaving him behind in the parking lot. Steve continued to harass the city hall after that. showing up uninvited and lingering until closing time. He called multiple departments, disrupting their work. He didn't make a scene at the counters, so reporting him as a nuisance was difficult. Finally, I decided it was best to disappear. I explained everything to HR and was transferred to a branch office in the mountains. It was a quieter place, with fewer residents, but the work felt more fulfilling. I never returned to my old office. I didn't regret cutting ties with Steve, nor did I miss the complications of being labeled a stepchild or a legitimate child. Free at last, I could focus on building a life of my own, far from my brother's shadow.